and welcome. Today we're bringing you another Institute Weekly Review, and today we're looking at Defense Department releases a report discussing a future moon-based economy in 2035. Navy requests tech for beyond GPS hypersonic missile guidance. And let's get into the news. Alright, so what you're looking at here is basically a proposed idea from DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, and basically what they want to do is have like about 2035, they want to have like a moon economy where people are actually on the moon and basically making money and interacting basically as we would on Earth. But as a part of getting towards that, they're looking at and trying to study ways that the existing commercial space entities, so think about like Blue Origin, SpaceX, and companies like that, how they can work together in order to make that happen. And they recently had like a spring meeting, and they talked about basically maybe some future plans that they have. And one of the things that I thought was like really intriguing about that was one, just the number of companies that were interested in showing up there. So there were companies like Blue Origin, SpaceX that I mentioned. And then there were smaller companies like Fiber Tech out there, which is basically going to make some sort of commercial, or not commercial, but like a light-based interconnection communication device. And then you also had Northrop Grumman there, which is a very important aerospace prime. They're one of the basically big three, like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and Northrop would be considered kind of the big three. And there were like a bunch of interesting things that were proposed by these people. So for instance, SpaceX, they proposed that in the future, when we're on the moon in 2035, we could bring a lot of cargo with us on their main rocket platform, and then land it down. And then they were proposing that you could use that as basically a habitation where everyone would kind of surround and funnel resources to and fro that as like their HQ. And then Blue Origin, they proposed they could use their Mk1 lander as basically a hub for both power and communications. And then Northrop Grumman, which I thought was really interesting, they whenever Northrop Grumman was like referenced by the other entities, so like the way that this research or report worked is basically the entity, so like SpaceX or Northrop Grumman, proposed what they could bring and then thought about what the other people could bring and how they could work together. Well, whenever anyone referenced Northrop, they always mentioned that they could be a railway provider, which I thought was really interesting because I never really thought about Northrop as being a railway provider. I kind of associate them with like the bombers, and then they also worked on like an ICBM project that they lost. So I didn't know that they had this capability, but it seems to be something they're leaning into very heavily, and something that a lot of the other space entities seem to think that they are like the best at. So that's really interesting there. And then another thing I want to mention is that like why I kind of thought this was interesting is you're seeing that they're trying to basically like engineer like a proposed civilization here. So unlike a lot of civilizations that we've had previously where it was just, oh, hey, look, now we have water and a place where we can like plant stuff, so therefore we're going to live here, just kind of happenstance. Like the government through DARPA is trying to figure out a way to engineer a society. So I think it would be really interesting to see how like the growth of that society versus like a kind of spontaneous society, like, you know, Mason City, Iowa, or something like that. I'd be really interesting to see like if the things that they optimize for are right, because to me it seems like they're optimizing for things like communications and the ability to extract resources. But if you really want something to be stable, to me you want to have something where like basically people could have kids, because otherwise if you can't sustain a people population, then you'll never have an actual people economy. So it will certainly be interesting to see where this goes. I guess since we kind of have a different format here today, I'll just kind of open the floor right now for questions. So do you have any kind of quick questions, Zoe?
It wasn't so much a question as a conspiracy comment.
All right, I like it.
the conspiracy that this is just one elaborate way to make sure that the U.S. can determine the time zone of the moon, as mentioned in one of the previous episodes.
Yeah. They you know what? I'm all for it if we end up being the ones that control the moon. I don't know, like I'm obviously biased, but I think it'd be pretty cool if we could like have 51 states and the other one's just a moon.
Yeah, well, because at that point we populate the moon, so of course we'd be able to
Yeah.
determine the time zone.
Or like, we could set up something on the moon so that every time someone goes and looks up the moon wherever they are, they can see a giant American flag.
Oh yeah, that would be another thing is that if we populate the moon, we'd actually have people there to regularly replace the flag. Because otherwise, I believe it's been sun bleached.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. But anyway, we'll move on to the next one and we'll come back to some interesting ones later. Um,
Yeah.
so what you're seeing here is basically a diagram kind of describing a problem that was identified for the hypersonic missiles that people are working on. So if you're not familiar with hypersonics, essentially that just means missiles that are moving beyond the speed of sound. And it's kind of a focus area for the Department of Defense as maybe a reaction to what the other countries are doing. So, in about, I'd say like 2019, I think it was, the NDAA, so the National Defense Authorization Act, basically authorized some funding so that people could focus on hypersonic missiles. And that was kind of in reaction to like Russia fielding what's called a Kinzhal missile. And a Kinzhal missile was this missile that was alleged to have hypersonic capabilities. It seems now like it was kind of hyped up a little bit. But anyway, when the US decided to go into this, they had some immediate concerns. And one of those concerns was that when you're trying to steer these hypersonic missiles, it's almost as if they're self jammed. And what I mean by that is they are moving so fast that they ionize the air and then they have this plasma sheath around them. So, with that sheath on them, you can't communicate using electromagnetic waves because it can't get through that sheath. So if a missile is guided, and a lot of them are, by GPS or something equivalent, then it basically just loses where it is. And initially, when they were talking about developing these hypersonics from perspective of the U.S., they thought that this wasn't a big deal. And this was about 2020 when they said this, according to some reports I found. But recently, as of April, the U.S. Navy issued a Small Business Innovation Research grant or project that someone could bid on, where they were looking for uh, beyond GPS guidance for these hypersonics because they specifically state that they cannot communicate with these systems. And I thought this was really interesting for a couple reasons. So, like, if they said that previously and then they decided, okay, no, we actually do need these, does that mean that they have already developed these systems and that they kind of realized as they were testing, oh crap, they just don't work, which would be one big problem because then there's a lot of waste that's going on. Or two, is it potentially that they're kind of lying by issuing this public bid or request and kind of trying to like spook other countries? I don't know. That was something that I was really intrigued by, and I don't know if that's something that seems interesting to use. So like this idea that you'd want to like use the public face of your like interaction with small businesses to kind of like fake to other countries what your real capabilities are.
I mean, it would be the ultimate bluff, poker face kind of scenario.
Yeah. And then I was also kind of like, when I saw this, I was like, well, why would they do it as a small business thing? And also, why would they even like reveal to anyone that they need this capability like that? Like obviously they need to communicate to people who could potentially offer it, but why not go through classified channels? To me, it seems weird that you would reveal this thing as well. And then another thing that I was thinking about is like, um, so they waffled and they said, okay, we don't need it, but actually, no, we do need something that goes beyond GPS guidance. So it makes me think that like either they thought that they didn't need the accuracy that is provided by GPS, so like maybe they had a different payload, or they yeah, I don't know. It's really strange to me because another part of the proposal is that they ask for people to make GPS like guidance outputs. So they want whatever system that people make that allows them to go beyond GPS to basically mimic what GPS would output. So it makes me think like they already had the capability and then they were just screwed, and then and then they're just kind of like trying to draw for straws really quick. I don't know. What do you think about this, Zoe?
Um, well, just talking about that makes me think of like the whole reason they made it more open source instead of confidential is so they get a variety of input. Um, because who knows, maybe you're amateur. I don't know what they'd be in this situation, a programmer or a GPS dude, but might come up with something better than what they can come up with in the Pentagon.
But like
Really
there's secure information. Like there's ways that they can communicate to like private industry in secure ways. So to me, to put this out public, I'm just like, why?
Yeah, I mean, there always is going to be the chance for conspiracies. Um, I think we're smart in a lot of ways, but I think we're also really dumb. So like, I don't know that they are putting this particular thing out there to spook other people, because I don't think they would really think anything much of it compared to some of their bigger projects. But
Another thing that I thought was interesting was so the capability that is like they want like a physical device basically that will provide guidance outputs like a system that is guided by GPS would. So it makes me think that maybe they have a platform already that works too, and that they want like this additional capability that they can swap in and out, maybe for a more precise version of something that they already fielded. So maybe it's like that they have like they were right when in 2020 they said they don't really need it GPS guidance because it'll be fine. But then they decided, oh well, maybe we need more precision with a different payload. So therefore, then now we need it. So we're gonna swap in this one component. I don't know. Like, if you were
yeah,
designing things, it makes sense you'd want to swap in and out components, I guess. So you could have like for one system, you could have like all these variants.
yeah, maybe it is like you said. Maybe they already have it, and they're really not looking for more of it. They're looking for people, and this is just an elaborate way of recruiting uh, more secret agents.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, we'll kind of call it there, and we'll kind of hit our backlog. So, any generic questions kind of related to these two things? Kind of like maybe something combining these, or maybe do you have your own news that you saw? Since I'm kind of missing a third article that you'd like to talk about.
I was just gonna make a comment on the first one again. Is I'm
Yeah.
just curious, like how big of a settlement would there have to be until we start seeing it from the naked eye? Because I know we like see the little dots for the moon craters, but I don't really know how big those craters are that we can see them.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Well, oh well. Guess my batteries. Better anyway. Well, my answer to that is I don't know, but I think that would be really interesting in the future because it brings up the point that we're going to eventually start to see that on the moon, which will be really interesting. And I feel like once we for the first time, get to see civilization like that, that's when we'll really, that's when we'll know we actually have a stable, like, other planet civilization. So I'm really looking forward to
Uh,
that. Do you think we could get to that before like we're dead, or do you think that's like way out there?
um, I think we could potentially see the start of something like that, but I don't think we see any real results of it.
Hmm.
Uh, what is it? I was also going to say the would planetary forces, would that be a suburb of the Space Force?
Oh, that would be really interesting. So you're saying like external planetary forces?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so weird. I don't know. I feel like it would almost be like each. So for instance, like let's say we get to a planet that's mostly water. Well then, would you then go and put all of the Navy assets like under the Space Force, and then they would take those assets and be like the Space Navy Force? To me, that seems weird. It seems like at that point we would say, okay, the Navy has to work through the Space Force in order to get to the moon, and then it's just a regular Navy again.
Yeah. In this, we kind of do our interplanet communications through the Space Force, but each planet has their own, like, um, like the Moon Navy.
Yeah.
Not that there's a need for a Moon Navy, but um, or like the
We
Moon
don't know
Army.
yet. I mean, maybe there will be a big a need for it, but
And well, and who even knows if the when we have these new planetary ventures, if we'll take the same approach to things in terms of a military system, or um, maybe it will be a utopian society or something.
I don't know. I
Who
think it'd be
knows?
more likely that what would end up happening is kind of like how America and like the UK ended up splitting, or England, I mean. So like maybe we'll go and we'll form like this. So the United States will send some people out, and all of a sudden they'll be like, wait, it's kind of whack that we have to like transport all this stuff back and forth to the Earth. Why don't we just make our own military and then just call it Moonlandia? You know what I mean? I feel like that's what we'll
Yeah,
probably see.
but yeah, it's something interesting hearing about space civilization, because obviously we've heard a lot about Mars, but this is the first time I've heard about populating the moon.
And I guess like to me it was always weird that we would focus on Mars, because why not focus on something a little bit more like closer to us that we've actually landed on
Yeah,
before, you know? Like it seems like they were jumping like way ahead of the idea there. Maybe it's just because Mars is like kind of close to like more habitable than like the
yeah,
moon is. But I mean, you've already demonstrated, or some people will allege that we didn't get on the moon, but official Western canon is that we were on the moon. So if that's the case, why not start small?
yeah. Um, no, now people are gonna be like, "This is stage two now."
It'll be, well, at least this time it will be somewhat harder to argue when like you actually see lights and stuff.
Yeah.
Then it would be like, okay, I can actually see that, like, okay, the Americans really did get there. But anyway, that's all we got for this week. It was kind of a little bit different format this week, but next week we'll probably get back to the same format.